name is Josh Rivedal. Welcome to Cubicle Lift, where we are going to be talking about workplace mental health. I have a co-host, Efrem Epstein, who I will introduce in just a moment. My name is Josh Rivedal. I have two amazing guests as well. This is our very first episode, so we're kind of just figuring it out. So we're like heavy on content and material, short on marketing taglines. My name is Josh. I'm with the I'm Possible Project. We talk about mental health, suicide prevention in the workplace and colleges, high schools, and it's a very, very important topic, and we're going to find out why soon enough. I don't want to talk too much more because there's more interesting people on this than I am, so I want to kick it to Efrem Epstein, and then we will introduce our incredible guest. Efrem, take it away. Tell us who you are.
So yeah, I think this is going to be a thing where we each try to claim that we are the least interesting person here, which I'm excited to be here with a bunch of interesting people. And I think I've partnered with each of them at one point or another on a mental health project, and in many cases on a mental health in the workplace project. I'm the founder of a 501c3 called Elijah's Journey, which focuses on suicide awareness prevention in the Jewish community. I'm also a member, along with Miriam, of the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention's Faith Communities Task Force. I'm one of the co-authors in a new book, I think it's out August 16th, about men's journeys in mental health, Guts, Grit, and Grind, edited by Sally Spencer-Thomas and Sarah Gayer. And as my day job, I'm blessed to be the chief marketing officer of a tech company called Zipline, which is in the digital adoption platform space, not specifically mental health, but obviously we're all concerned about mental health in the workplace. And one of the big things we focus on is improving the employee experience. So it all comes back to mental health in the workplace. And that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, F. And I want to allow Miriam to introduce herself, first and last name and all the good stuff. So Miriam Ament, and I might be pronouncing your last name totally incorrectly. Got it. Miriam is actually an author in one of my books in the I'm Possible Project, and she's doing incredible things in the mental health space and tangentially in the suicide prevention space as well. So I feel very lucky that we have Miriam on the show. Miriam, can you take it away and tell us about yourself and what you do, all that good stuff?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be on with such wonderful people. Efrem and Josh have been such wonderful allies and advocates and friends in the work that we do. I am the founder of No Shame on You, which is a nonprofit dedicated to eliminating the stigma associated with mental health conditions and raising awareness. And we do a whole host of outreach programs and distribute resources. And we have a big online presence where we share tools and resources daily. We do educational presentations. We've, in the last 4 months, done a massive pivot since COVID. So we've done over 65 programs online and are grateful that we have so much going on and are able to move forward and support the community. A little bit about how I got to become the founder of No Shame on You. I, over 15 years ago, was hospitalized for depression 3 times and faced a lot of stigma and isolation. The best example of that is during my second hospitalization, one of my then closest friends, who I had been friends with since we were 5, called me in the hospital and said, "I only want to talk to you when you're happy, so let's not talk again for a while." And then I never heard from her again. So that was a huge bummer, and it ended up extending my hospital stay. And I ended up keeping my hospitalizations a secret for a very long time. And I worked in a law firm managing arbitrations and trials, and no one knew about my mental health history. And then a little over 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet the actress Glenn Close, who, as you may know, is a huge mental health advocate. And it was obviously a huge honor to meet her. And I ended up telling her my story. And I realized if I can tell this legendary actress my story, and she was so cool about it, that I could have an impact in my community and take what I thought was such a negative and make it a positive. So I ended up deciding to do a whole career shift and start No Shame on You and make what I thought was this horrible secret into this wonderfully positive thing. And you know, we're so thrilled with how we've grown and the great people I've met along the way and all of that. So that's a little bit about me and how I came to do what I do.
Yeah, I just want to say, I remember I I think this may have been the one time that Miriam and I actually met in person. We've spoken many times, but was when I came out to Chicago when you hosted Glenn Close's sister, and I got to hear her speak. And fascinating story, and awesome for all you've done.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for all your support along the way. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Miriam. I see your emails often, so I get to know what you're doing. So it's very exciting. And storytelling is such a powerful thing, and I think we'll probably get into that as we move forward. But we have another guest to introduce and to talk to, and I hope he's going to unmute himself in a moment. But Sumeet Shah, another guy. I think we actually, I don't know if you remember this or not. We had like coffee, I think about 5 or 6 years ago at a Starbucks on like 6th Avenue in the 40s. I remember it specifically because it was one of the last times I'm in New York. Not important, not very interesting. What's more interesting is to hear you talk about yourself and what you do. Sumeet, please take it away.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I do remember during that times, and even a joke that it's a wonderful pre-pandemic time frame, especially for the roller coaster of the past few months that New York City has been in. Hello, everyone. I'm Sumeet Shah. I run pipeline and portfolio strategy for an early stage and growth stage venture capital firm called Swift Arc Ventures. The firm originally started in April of 2019, last year, to lead and co-lead seed and Series A investments in the world of consumer brands and products. We've launched subsequently earlier stage funds that are more labs generated, as well as investment funds looking into the futures of areas like telehealth and food safety. Prior to that, I helped start another early stage venture capital firm in the consumer space back at the beginning of 2014, joined as senior associate and moved my way up as principal at that firm as well. Invested in multiple consumer startups and really had these past 6 years of my time frame working with various founders and entrepreneurs in the space as well. Prior to that, working in consulting. And so my entire life, my entire career has been across the world of consumer. But what's really been an area that's been personally and professionally powerful for me is where the future of mental health is coming, especially when it comes to the space of entrepreneurship. A lot of it was due to personal battle as well. I've been battling depression and anxiety my entire life, all the way to very dark and deep, difficult parts in my career and in my lifetime, due to just everything from just general bullying to absolute just violence and violent issues and symptoms. But what I've realized also, spending a lot of this time in the world of startups, is unfortunately a lot of the tech media and press and a lot of the insular systems that do exist across the coast and across the different spaces, that everybody loves to celebrate the positives, but a lot of media loves to put spotlights on the negatives and really just pile on the frustrations and the difficulties for things. Founders, really look at a position where it unfortunately seems to be the loneliest job in the world. No one is really rooting for you, and they'll only come to you when the positives are coming out, when the big wins come through it. But very few people actually see the inside part of it, like working in late nights, really where the only cheerleader is yourself. And it's something personally for me where, whether it's working with various startups and platforms that are encouraging people to be more vulnerable, encouraging more people to be difficulties and frustrations, and especially in this time frame where COVID-19's pandemic has been really challenging people mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's been an area that matters so much more than ever to work through, whether it's building the right platforms, having the right products out there, but having, more importantly, the conversations across each other. So it's something that I have virulently stood for, and I will continue to. So once again, F and Josh, thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad that for this first episode we can talk a lot about this as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, but I know I don't want to get too far ahead of the game with storytelling, but Sumeet, so I remember you and I had known each other from a few events, been together at a few startup events, schmoozed a few times, and I remember this. I was in a cab to go to an event that I was actually doing with Josh in 2016 at the Microsoft store. And in the cab, I read a forwarding email from a mutual friend of ours, a mutual friend of yours, Sumeet's, and mine, who basically said, did you see this article that Sumeet wrote about his lived experience? And I guess at that point, you know, even though I'd been involved in this cause for a while, it still surprised me a little bit when I saw somebody successful, or somebody that I've deemed very successful and out there, really going public and saying, I'm struggling. And so reading your story was very powerful, very validating for me. And I remember then I said to you, listen, I'd love to talk to you more, Mark, with you about this. And if you'd like to partner, being that you feel comfortable being open about this. And the second one in the series, I think Josh did the first event in that series at the Microsoft store. And I believe the second one in that series, Sumeet, you were a panelist with. And just to bring this all home, I believe that was like the week after I had been in Chicago to see Miriam. This is all in the fall of 2016 that all this was going down.
And the same day, Sumeet and I had lunch. So boom, dynamite. I love that. So why don't we stay on this if y'all don't mind, and then we could maybe shift back, or maybe we'll cover that first question that we kind of outlined. But like Miriam, Sumeet, and then F, I'm sure you know you can chime in, or we'll figure it out. Somebody will play our traffic controller. But why is storytelling so important when we talk about mental health in the workplace? What does that do to the conversation, or for the conversation?
So storytelling, I mean, research shows that one of the biggest ways to eliminate the stigma associated with mental health conditions is for people to have contact with lived experience. So people hearing the stories of others and knowing A, that they're not alone, and B, that there's no shame, and that you can be a high functioning, I mean, Sumeet's a perfect example. You can be a high functioning, do these amazing things in the workplace and still live with a mental health condition. And there's a way to navigate that. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, or are afraid to talk about it, thinking that how is it going to affect their work or their social life and all that. But knowing that it's so common and you're not alone, and that you can navigate, and you should reach out for help. I think that is why storytelling can be so very powerful.
Brilliant. Sumeet, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's actually another deeper experience about storytelling from here, is that it doesn't have to be a perfect story. You don't have to be having this perfect blog post, this perfect response from it. So it's a development where there's this strive to be perfect. And just touching specifically in the world of entrepreneurship, you have to be raising the right capital. You have to be doing the right press. You have to be building the right product, and everything has to be all perfect from here. And I am personally excited to see a lot of that mindset being sledgehammered, per se, because it shouldn't be looked upon it. You're building something that you are learning. It is a process. It is an evolution. The same way that we have evolved as a society and as a species, we are always evolving as people. We're evolving as humans in general, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And it's something that we should really be accepting more of it. We shouldn't look to the fact that like any sort of sign of weakness is looked upon, or any sort of emotional distress is looked upon as a sign of weakness. It's really disturbing in some levels that we still have a lot of that mindset, especially when it comes to toxic masculinity. I mean, it's a situation where we don't like men do not prop each other up enough, where it's just that we're almost cutting each other down in various ways to it. And that affects both genders. It affects everyone that's involved in it, from other men to women, of course, as well. As you go even deeper to how that translates to a person in terms of their personal responses, to then it translates to the professional workplace, you know, we then really just start cracking over time. But we also get back into our shells, not even just for asking for help, but also just assuming everything's okay. And we look at the cases of successful people who are now openly talking about their difficulties. You have people like Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, who has been open about being more vulnerable as a leader across it all. You have even people like Elon Musk, who recognizes the fact he suffers from depression, and he has gone through very difficult times in his life. And when it comes to that storytelling, it's the more open, the more situationally aware we can be onto it, the better that not just we can be, but other people, especially followers, fans across it all, they will recognize that, hey, not just we should be doing this more, but maybe it's cool to be open and vulnerable, I guess. Whatever the right mentality needs to happen is, again, driven by that storytelling.
Yeah, I am going to do something that may be dangerous, but I'm going to actually wade a little bit into politics, not endorsing anybody or not getting too partisan here. But you want to talk about how far we've come. I think it was in 1972, we had somebody who was a vice presidential candidate who had to drop out or had to be deselected because it came out that they had struggled or they had been in a mental hospital. We now have somebody running for president on a major ticket who has been very open about the fact that he had suicidal thoughts at one point. Joe Biden, I think it was in 2012, I think it was on the Memorial Day address that he spoke at that point as vice president to I think it was the troops. I think it was at Arlington. I could be wrong on some of the details. And he basically, it wasn't the first time they had told the story about when he lost his first wife and child, but he did talk about, and he said, something along the line, people can Google the exact words of, it was that time I first understood why some people could struggle with suicidal thoughts. And I think it was important, he said, not because there was something wrong with them, but because I think his words were something along the lines of they'd been to the mountain and then were scared they were never going to get back there again. And I will tell you from my lived experience, that resonates with me. I think that the times that I've been most stressed and most upset and struggled the most are where I've said, really, am I ever going to experience the greatness that I had in the past? And if not, what is there for me? And so I think it's very, very powerful, whether you vote for him or not, to at least acknowledge it is major that we now have somebody running for president on a major ticket that said, I've been through this. I've been suicidal. And you know what? If you've been through that, there's nothing wrong for you. There's nothing wrong with you. And you can be a CEO, you can be an athlete, and you can even run for president.
Mm.
That's a powerful way to look through it, F. And just responding to that specifically, I think it's not even just in terms of his conversations about mental health and that he was going through very difficult, depressive episodes, but Biden's, very often talked about his struggles with suffering. And it's a system where everything from the bullying to just the lesser man perspective that he's always got, and he still gets to this day from people, it's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate the fact that he still has to battle through some of these demons, but it's also something that, admittedly, from the way that he's responded from it, he is really pushed back onto the insults and hatred across it, is something that is opened up to many people, is that, hey, you should never be afraid, and you should never look to go back into your shell from it. I mean, his personality is always, he calls it as he sees it, whether it's anything from his difficult troubles to the ways that others have been facing, whether it's calling out on, marriage equality, whether it's calling out on affordable healthcare. He had never been afraid. And I think in the past, even 5 years or so, we've come such a long way from it still being a taboo topic to people not being afraid from it all. And I think a lot of it is also due to this great push in the political sphere from much younger candidates and much younger conversations. And you have this younger generation, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, et cetera, that are pushing forward for why not? There's no partisanship. There's no just comfortable settling from it all. People are looking to question why things are working from it. And I think when we have so many different leaders in charge now, young and old, no matter what gender and sexual orientation, and it is admittedly across multiple levels of the political spectrum, we are really having this great opportunity to move forward, to not just, of course, talk more about it, to be open about it, about our struggles, but also provide the tools and resources that are necessary to help with treatment, diagnosis, but also just giving people a comfortable platform for it.
And
I think.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please, Miriam.
I just wanted to add, because I think F mentioned athletes, and I think an important thing to point out is someone like Kevin Love, who wrote a huge, who's an NBA player, who wrote a huge article in the Players Tribune and actually just received an SB award, the Arthur Ashe Courage Award, for speaking out about his mental health. And I think that just taking it to that realm, Shame on You works with a lot of teens, and I know so many teens who the fact that this athlete who they look up to and admire, and he seems to have it all in terms of success and everything that comes along with that, he still struggles, and that's okay, and he's being open about it. And I think that kind of storytelling has such an impact on people who look up to someone like a Kevin Love. I know so many teens that really, because he has spoken out, they're comfortable sharing their story, and they're comfortable knowing that it's okay that I live with anxiety or depression, and that even people who seemingly have it all go through this. And he also has had an impact, on the NBA and increasing mental health awareness in the NBA in general. And I think sports in general is now, they're trying to provide more and more support to their athletes. But in any event, I just wanted to bring up that realm, that in sports, I think that athletes coming out and talking about this has really had such an impact on so many of their fans and really the world.
Yeah. Going to show some love to one of my teams, the Philadelphia Eagles, Brian Dawkins. I mean, seriously, these are, I think back to not so long ago. I don't play pickup sports that much anymore. I was never really good at them, but that for some reason it was always a line that if you were a good player, then you were mentally strong, and that was what you wanted to be. I think it really says a lot that one has nothing to do with the other. If you're good at shooting the basketball in the net, or you're good at throwing a football, that's great, and that should be celebrated. But it has nothing to do about whether you're struggling or not, nor should it. And none of it is anything to be ashamed of.
I think what a lot of what I'm hearing is just this, like distilling in a way, is just how people present versus like perceptions. And I mean, this isn't a complete distillation of what all has been said, but I think we do a lot of times make those assumptions, and when that story comes out, it changes perceptions. I mean, there's one quick little story that I can think about. I think it was 2008, and actually I'll give this quick story. So I presented in juvenile detention centers a few times, and when I walked in, it's largely marginalized communities, kids who are either have a disability and got shoved there, or kids from the Black and brown communities, or even LGBT youth who were kicked out of their homes, and that's the last place they got shoved, and it's just awful. And so they look at this guy, and I'm wearing like a sport jacket and jeans, and they're like, "Who's this Wonder Bread idiot? Like, what's he doing walking in here?" And then I tell my story, and then it changes the game, and it's like, wow, he's one of us, because I've been through so many difficult and just ridiculous and traumatic things in my life. And so for me, and then conversely, like I'll give talks at colleges, middle schools, etc. And one of my, sometimes I'll bring it up, but it's like, if I'm in finance, or if I'm in leadership, or if I'm whatever, and usually those gurus, they'll say, they'll tell you how good they are, and that's their job. Well, my job is to tell you how many problems I have. Like, that's my job. Like, to normalize though, that like, hey, it's okay. Like, I'm up here. You don't have to have it all together, but I've learned these skills to learn how to pivot and move and change on its head. And in fact, I tell people, whether I'm telling my story, or if I'm in an Uber on the way to the airport and they want to talk about what I do, I'll say, hey, listen, you don't have to feel bad for me. I'm doing fine. I'll give you a good tip too on the, but I'm fine. It's more so, actually, I see this as a superpower, because I get to use it to have big, deep, meaningful conversations. And I think differently because of this. I've had to, right? So like, I think that's what storytelling does though, is like, people can say, oh, wow, me too. I can have that kind of success, or I can have it in my own way. Sumeet, you said something too, and it was along the lines of partisanship, but I want to say more, it doesn't discriminate whether you're trans, whether you're brown, whether you're old, whether you're young. These are things, everybody has physical health, everybody has mental health, right? And to me, that's what storytelling does, and that's what your stories do for me, you know, and I just find that inspirational as well.
So one thing I wanted to, this could be maybe an interesting segue from the politics thing we're on right now into the workplace. There was an article I saw, I'm not sure whether anyone else saw it. It was written by, I think, the economic advisor, one of the top economic advisors to California Governor Gavin Newsom. It's all great. I think that in an abstract, many or most people nowadays say, sure, mental health in the workplace, great, I want to be supportive, but it's really tricky to then say, I'm going to give this person I'm relying the space they need, or going to find ways to work around their schedule, because at the same time, you know, that person's still working for you, you still are counting on them, the balance there. I thought it was very, very powerful, because that this person was able to take a leave. A very important job, especially nowadays, economic advisor to Gavin and Newsom. But, you know, they made it work. They made it work, and he took a leave. And I'll admit, I don't know a lot about Gavin Newsom. I think people from California might have a lot more to say, positive or negative. But, you know, I'm very impressed that they made that work.
Yeah, I read that article, and it was what was so powerful was that I think his name is Lenny, who's the man who opened up about his depression and anxiety and took the lead. I think what's so powerful is that he had friends and relatives saying, don't open up. Like, there was a press release that said, like, due to personal or family reasons, he's taking a leave of absence, or and he decided, well, when I had a motorbike accident and I got, you know, it was like a badge of honor that I got like a something put in my leg, you know, why would I not talk about this when it's so common? And he decided to use it as a platform. And I think that is so powerful, and really, you know, it says a lot about him, and the fact that he's using his story and equating it to an injury from a bike, you know, accident or something like that, and saying, you know, the brain is a very important part of our body, and why would I not talk about that if I'm going to talk about injuring my leg? Another thing I just wanted to add, referring to Josh's story earlier, is that in terms of along the lines of storytelling and also how you can relate to people, you know, we were doing a support group with young adults that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And the first few times, similar to Josh, the first few times we met with them, they were like, who are you? And they knew I was from this organization, but they sort of like didn't know who I was. The third time we met, it came out that I'd been hospitalized for depression and that I had this whole story. Immediately they were all like, you're one of us? And I was like part of the group, and I had like total credibility. And it was really, really interesting how the shift of knowing that I had this background that they didn't think I shared, that I in fact I did, made me very much a part of the group. And it was really a turning point, and I'm still in touch. I mean, with everyone I met there, and it's almost becomes a common sort of shared a shared commonality with everyone, that like you have the story and the power that has, and the connection that people have, and the belonging that people have when they know that you've had these experiences that they didn't anticipate that you had. So I just wanted to share that.
I love that. I want to actually take what you led off with and kick it into another question for everybody. The Lenny Mendonca article, we talked about Gavin Newsom. All right, so we're having this conversation. The four of us are. But what are the implications of not having this conversation? Not just us, but like in the workplace in general. What are the implications? I mean, Mendonca talks about it, but kick it, you know, your style. Refer to the article, whatever you want to do. But I just want to hear, like, what are the implications of not having this conversation?
Sumeet, do you want to go?
No, go for it, Miriam. I have responses, but let you go first.
Oh, okay. Well, a couple of things. So one is that depression is a leading cause of disability worldwide. So not having these conversations and people not feeling comfortable to get the support they need in the workplace can be detrimental to their productivity, to their engagement, to, you know, so many aspects of their work life. And together with the importance of that, I wanted to share a brief story that just happened we have a weekly blogger, and she shared that and this is someone who's lived with OCD since she was age 3. And she was very excited that her workplace just recently, as a result of COVID, changed are providing more health more health support. And as part of that, there was a survey, and it asked about physical stuff and mental health. And so here you think, oh, that's so great. Like, in other words, that is a great thing that's going on in this person's workplace. And then it turns out that any answer she gave to the mental health had a wrong answer. Like, if she said she had a lot of anxiety, it was like read and considered wrong. And to me, it was, sort of like, there are so many implications, not only having the conversation, but doing it in a way that's supportive, because that made this person feel so bad about themselves that these are wrong answers. And the fact that I'm having stress and anxiety due to COVID is considered wrong and unacceptable. You know what I mean? So I think that there are implications both to feel supported and also to feel supported in the right, I would say right way is tricky, but to feel supported in the best way possible, so that no one's looking at you having stress or anxiety as a negative, because that person came away from that survey feeling so bad about themselves when they work so hard to manage their OCD, and then to be told by the survey, oh, you're wrong, and that's red, and you know what I mean? So I think that there are levels to feeling supported and the importance of that and the productivity that can happen, and also workplaces understanding and researching the best way to support, and making sure that a survey doesn't make someone feel worse about themselves, even though they had the best of intentions.
Exactly.
Thank you, Miriam.
So, thank you as well, Miriam. And touching on a couple of points that you mentioned across and thinking about some of the terminologies, the concept of the badge of honor and the level of punishment that really exists across in the workplace, where it's like, again, it's feeling like a sign of weakness. And I think about the most important part of our bodies to make sure that we are working at peak performance for any sort of role, professionally or personally. It's the brain, right? And I look at a lot of these systems from a very bare-boned, common sense, ethical perspective to it, because I think the levels of partisanship, politics, social media, all these things have turned people into really focusing not just on their own bubbles, but really only having a very closed mindset to it. And that perspective has removed a lot of the just open, aware styles of analysis through common sense and ethics. And when we look at about that in this situation when it comes to mental health, for those who don't feel comfortable, for those who feel that there might be some I guess boundaries, whether it's direct or indirect boundaries that people feel from it, again, whether it's due to feeling that they're going to be punished, they're going to be looked more down upon it is a travesty in the workplace itself to not recognize it. It is an absolute travesty. And even if it's like an employee group of 2 or an employee group of 2,000, you have to build programs, whether you know that people are going through these struggles. And it is not difficult to build affordable programs, whether it's even creating lists of resources, working with your head of culture or your head of people to manage systems from this. Because quite frankly, if you're running HR systems from it, you should be having this anyway. In, I believe it's a regulation, a federal regulation that HR, human resources departments, should be having systems in place to protect their employees from infectious diseases. And if we think about it from that perspective, again, from common sense and ethics, we should have tools, resources, everything available when we're looking about spaces for mental health, because we want our employees, we want our colleagues to be working at their absolute peak performance. And if we are not providing what is necessary to make sure that they can get the opportunities from it, healthy and health related, then we are doing a disservice to our employees, our colleagues, our people from it. So it is an absolute disaster if people feel that they just aren't comfortable being able to talk about it for the purpose of the workplace itself, for the purpose of the people running the show from it. And if you're not seeing it as an issue or you're not seeing it as a problem, then I hate to say it, but you're part of the problem from it. You have to evolve for this.
Sumeet, I love the word that you just ended with, evolve, because that's what it is, evolve. I think most, but not all people realize that the workplace of 2020 is not the workplace that we saw on TV in the 60s or the 70s. Actually, I wasn't really alive for the 60s, but of, let's call it Mr. Slate. Basically, Foots don't do that or you're fired. That was the workplace that I saw presented on TV when I was young, and it probably had some, not all, but some truths from the culture of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You run your workplace like that, you're not going to get maximum productivity. You're not going to get people at their best. Maybe it'll make the power hungry bosses feel good, but you're not going to get where you want to be. There was a chairman of IBM. I'm blanking on his name, but he said something that I think is really true. He said the secret to success is basically put the people who work for you first, and then they'll do anything for you. And you want to get the best out of your team. You really want them to basically take you to the moon, take you to maximum profits, maximum productivity. You know what? Every chance you get, remind them, not just remind them, but show them that they come first and you really value them first. And you know what? Then they'll want to go to the moon for you. And then everybody gets what they want.
I'm looking at a Sun Tzu quote that I keep on this document, and it kind of ties in what you said. And it's in the male masculine form because this was written hundreds of years ago, maybe thousands, I can't remember. But it says, "Treat your men as you would your own beloved sons, and they will follow you into the deepest valley." And I think that is like, wow, that resonates to me with what we're talking about in terms of, just treating people with dignity and respect, and just assuming the best. And when we don't talk about this stuff, shame is destructive. I mean, it really is. And when we hide and don't talk about our stuff, I mean, it just breeds, you stay in the darkness, and mental health, when not dealt with, can certainly cause physical health symptoms as well. I can personally attest to that. I didn't get a mental health diagnosis for 20 years, from age 8 to 28. And even knowing about my diagnoses, my depression and anxiety, not knowing about that and not having that conversation, because we see not Slate, but other kinds of depictions on television where you're less than, you're not a man, you're this, it ate me from the inside out. And I could have had an even more productive and healthier life for those extra 20 years. Kicking it back though, there's a bottom line. I'm going to quote that Mendonca article just for a moment. And some of it has to do with, some of it, he does talk about COVID and stuff that it's sort of COVID related, but also just work related in general. But at the moment, in April, he says that nearly half, or about 45% of adults across the country, said worry and stress related to the coronavirus pandemic was hurting their mental health. Rates of depression and anxiety have tripled. And he quotes a Jeffrey Pfeiffer article that says 61% of employees said that workplace stress has made them sick. Job stress costs U.S. employers more than $300 billion annually. So for me, I'm thinking so we have this conversation. Do we both have the productivity conversation? Do we have the storytelling conversation? Can we blend the two? Because for me, that is just glaringly obvious. I've been sort of banging my drum, not as much in public for a few years, but just talking about, we need to talk and implement and things around mental health in the workplace, mental health days, even in colleges too, where you can't really have mental health days like you can have sick days. I was talking to a student recently who we're working on some stuff together, at least in a friendly manner. But going back, so we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. We certainly are. What are y'all seeing or experiencing or hearing in regards to COVID-19 affecting mental health in the workplace? Is there any effects happening? I kind of quoted it, but there's got to be some other stuff happening. I'd love to hear your voices and words on this. Not all at once, though.
Yeah, of course.
There's from what I'm hearing, there are so many layers to the anxiety. There's the stress of working from home And for some people, that means feeling disconnected from others if they are living alone and not having the regular social interactions with their coworkers. There's the stress if one has a family and has kids that are around, and that while they love their kids, that can be challenging, especially during a pandemic, to keep the kids occupied and get the work done and meet deadlines and all of that. So there's that level of stress. Then there's the stress that people have of what's it going to look like going back to work. And you know, if I have an ID and I, you know, whatever, like some places I know have like a fingerprint security system. So am I going to touch that? And then everyone else is going to touch that. And even if there's antibacterial gel, do I want to touch that? And let alone, what if someone's exposed? And I have a friend who works in HR and is dealing with, not that many people are back in the office, but a few are. And if one person's exposed or has the virus, what does that mean for the workplace, and who has to then be quarantined? And so there's so much stress involved with all these different aspects that it's almost endless. I mean, not to not to be a downer, but it's just a very stressful time. I will say, on the flip side, I know someone who, you know, is not someone who likes to be social. So he loves that he's staying home and working from home. And you know, so there are those people that this is, you know, better for their lifestyle. So I don't want to say it's a negative for everyone, but people are, you know, the stress and anxiety of the different layers and then the anticipatory stress of what's going to be and what's it going to look like, you know, are very, very, very real.
Yeah, I could tell you, as somebody that has not had a handshake or a hug in nearly 6 months right now, it takes a toll on you. And I don't know when that day is going to come. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of virtual interaction and even some occasional interaction from 6 feet apart. But you know what? There are definitely people that are affected by that and are missing that, and that can't help but play a part. And there's a reason why people have opted into places over the years, like WeWork, instead of working at home. It's because they want to be around people and they want the energy, and that's not there. I was very, very impressed by a colleague of mine. I wish I had asked her permission because I'd love to give her a shout out, but somebody who I actually know initially from the same community from where I knew Sumeet, who told me that she actually got in her car and drove to one of her employees' houses that was 45 minutes an hour away because she wanted just to wave to her. She wanted to just check in on her. And she's made it a point. I think we saw this in one of the other articles that we talked about that we saw. She said she's made a point that, you know what, very often she would begin every day by saying, "What are you working on?" or "Where are we with this?" Instead, she tries to open up everything by saying, "How is everybody?" And yes, there are ways to make sure that productivity stays on, while at the same time reminding people that first and foremost, they care about them. Sometimes it takes some thought, but there are ways to have both and not sacrifice one for the other.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a case. And I know that we actually live not too far away from each other, and it's been an interesting balance for me in terms of spending time to meet with friends across it all, but also just trying to find whatever outlet I need in terms of being to a more comfortable space to it. And I say that because, you know, I have tried to spend as much time as I can socially distanced with my parents, my family, who are conveniently over in New Jersey. And I know that other colleagues of mine have just been trying to figure out ways as well. And it's interesting you're mentioning plus with the WeWork trend, because my incredible girlfriend works at a company called Fox Wholesale, and they did a survey to see how many people would actually feel comfortable about going back to the office, and the overwhelming majority said no, because everyone, in terms of why they would want to come back, even if they said no, was, I just missed that interaction. But it's not going to be the same if we're going to be 6 feet apart, if we really can't actually have conversations across it. And it's going to be a very difficult perspective on an emotional toll until we get to a level where the right technologies and platforms exist from here. Because it's not even just about vaccines. It's about personal hygiene, just personal safety in terms of health and public health perspectives to it. Like, do we need more better sanitization? Because we also, I think that even after we get a vaccine and we also have a relative return to normal, we're going to be in a position where we are much more vigilant about personal hygiene in terms of flus and colds and everything from there. Now, that said, I think that because humans in general are community-driven creatures, we will tend to ignore some of those life cycles and life systems to there as well. We're obviously seeing that with all the different parties and party votes and everything that's coming through right now, right? All the social distancing violations and things that are coming through across the country, and unfortunately due to a lot of flare-ups on cases. But that's just, and a lot of it is due to human nature. And it is hard to, push aside public health onto it. But for what it's worth, I think that we will get to a position where we will be more mindful about it, and we'll get back to a sense of normalcy. Probably most likely will look like by the beginning of next year. But I think that that's also something to be looking forward to, as well as we, when we go into the blue days of summer, or blue days of winter, I apologize, into that space. But and also, there's also a side note for me to mention to F is like, we are going to hang out, I promise.
Okay, no. Waving to you right now. Waving to you
Literally.
right now.
Yeah. Actually, I think you're over there, so there we go.
I'm waiting to you. You're over there. Yeah. You mentioned Boxed, one company actually that was also incubated out of my alma mater, I believe, at Johns Hopkins University, just like the company I work for as well too. It's interesting. You mentioned, I don't want to bring us too off track, but you talk about personal hygiene and where it goes. Since we've been on here, I've coughed a couple of times. I don't believe it's all COVID related, but are we going to get to a place where somebody coughs? It could be due to any number of thousands of things, or we're going to say, oh my gosh, that person needs to wear a mask. I'm hoping that we get to a place that we're smart about these things and we're vigilant about what we're supposed to be vigilant about. At the same time, we're not drawing too many fences around things that we don't need to draw fences around.
That to me, this idea of coughing and personal hygiene, but it goes back to something Sumeet said, and a little bit, there's a little tinge of Miriam in here as well, but it goes back to me for, why aren't we as a society, and then trickle down to we're talking about workplace mental health. Well, mental health falls under public health. It does. And so we're not investing in that on a macro or a micro level nearly enough. And so one of the issues is, well, I got to play childcare provider to my kids and go to work, and it's too difficult. And so then you see that being a push to open schools, and that's, probably unsafe. But to me, and I don't even know, this is just more of a statement, but it's just like, we need to start thinking public health is wealth. When we invest in the public health side of things, because we're seeing all this inequity in education right now, in services, in who's able to work, frontline workers, necessary workers, non-necessary workers. The economy, 30 some odd million people are out of work right now. That's a big chunk of the workforce. And so certain people aren't even able to get to their workplace or their former workplace. And to me, having conversations like this hopefully lead to us campaigning on a local level, and then also and I don't mean just politics, but then on a national level for sure politics, because we need to start investing our time in candidates who are talking about public health and who aren't kicking the can down to generations just for a quick and easy tax cut this year so they can keep their job. Like, we need to start thinking more about public health, because mental health falls under it, and if we're not investing in that, then we lose our financial security. We're right now, it's happening.
And Josh, if I can just add on to that, and I'd really like to hear what Sumeet and Miriam have to say on this. Everything you say, I agree with. And we should be feeling that we should be doing this from a moral imperative for society, basically making it easier and more affordable and more accessible for people to get mental health, both related to the workplace, but also outside the workplace. Because if you're unemployed, you definitely should not be, you shouldn't have to be employed to have access to that as well. But I think that maybe one thing that I'd love us to talk about right now at the moment is the moral argument and the public health argument for doing this, to me, at least, is clear. But let's talk about the productivity argument. Let's talk about the fact that if we did this, maybe our GDP would go up because we'd have a more productive society and we'd have a more productive workforce. That is something which really, if we talk about it at all, it's nowhere nearly enough. But I think that maybe that's an argument that we need to talk about more, because I think that then maybe people who aren't on board would get on board. If we make it easier for people to get mental health, make it more accessible, not just reduce the stigma, but make it so that anybody who needs it can go to a therapist and it will be covered on insurance, or it will be paid for. In addition to being a more moral society and a healthier society, we're going to be a more productive workforce, and we're going to be a richer country.
And how about real quick? Sorry, real quick, because I'm just heated right now. And then we'll kick to you, Sumeet. But I'm also thinking, like, we're talking about normalizing and making it accessible and easy, but how about we start normalizing and making it easy and accessible to marginalized communities, Black and brown communities,
Absolutely.
In certain cases, the LGBT community, and then not tying mental health care to healthcare, tying it to work, and that. So like that to me, because once we have education and once we invest in healthcare, you want to talk about productivity, boom, there it is. Like, you want productivity? Let's educate our people. Let's make sure they're healthy. Let's stop penalizing people for having traumatic experiences as youth and as young people. And I think I'm going to stop there, because I could just go off on a whole other rabbit hole. And I really am a little more interested in hearing what Sumeet has to say.
So I always think about everything that we can talk through is admittedly very easy for us to talk about. It is always much harder to put in the work and create action from it. And so I think that to all of the people who are listening in to this episode, if you've seen any studies, if you've seen any work and organizational work and movements that have been done to not just outline the economic benefits of providing mental health services, building it into a public health system, whether it's in governments on a federal level, on a state level, on a local level, would love to see information across that all. There are various areas, by state, by local organizations that have shown some, and I unfortunately don't have those resources on hand right now. But I think about it in parallel to the way that mental health, unfortunately, has been used as a lazy alternative, and unfortunately, a bit of a scourge and a disease-driven mechanism when it comes to, and really one of the biggest areas, which is gun violence. A lot of the argument across on the issue is that, we need to have better mental health systems to find the triggers across all. Sure, yes, absolutely. There's no question that we can find the triggers and get down to the source of like where people are struggling with the difficulties. But unfortunately, the way that it's then marked upon is that it is a criminally driven system. And the way that you're talking through also how it's gone to income inequality, how it's gone to gender inequality, how it's gone to race inequality, that you're pointing to it, Josh. And unfortunately, that criminally driven ecosystem then more often than not, unfortunately, drives towards that the culprits are people of color, Black, brown men, and women. And it's disheartening in a country where our bedrock is based on all men and all humans are created equal, that we are letting down our own men, women, people, I should say, with that system. We are not providing the tools that we should be initiating, that we should be proactive as a country to push from it. Now, that said, very easy to talk about it. And whether it's everything from building a 311 type hotline for people to feel comfortable from starters, like whether it's starting from a general wave to then building the resources, building the tools, building the platforms, working with members of the tech community, working with members in the ecosystem, these and dare I say public-private partnerships that need to happen. that really ultimately focus on bettering our communities, bettering our people, bettering Americans, because, and going all the way back to what you said, there is an economic benefit on having ultimate peak performance, but not ultimate peak performance at the cost of human lives.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love that. And I think, you know, I want to.
Does that mean you to do a mic drop? I'm not really sure what to say.
I heard it. I heard the mic drop. But to me, because we are time is ever so marching on. And to me, you said something early on about actionability. And so to me, I'm curious, this is maybe a two-pronged question. So take it in whatever direction you want to go, but what are some actionable items for employers or employees? So that could be one side of it, or what are some companies doing who are leading the charge on this? Like what are we seeing right now that's happening in workplace mental health? Who's leading the charge and what are they doing? Right?
Yeah. I can't give you any specific examples across some companies, but I can give you general examples of what I've been seeing. I've seen the easiest way to start, like the lowest hanging fruit, resources, a list of resources that are readily available at any moment in time for employees, where it's very simple to find, whether it's directly from the internal HR department or even, half to the majority of the world using Slack at this point, right? Pinning resources for people to feel comfortable from that. That's the first level that I've seen in terms of easiest solution. And there are more than enough resources that are out there on a local, on a state, and on the federal level that people can also just create to it. Secondly is I've seen heads of culture, heads of people in larger companies build programs, having psychology resources, or even like in anonymous hotlines and anonymous ways that people can actually talk through their perspectives. And with the opportunity where it's almost a patient confidentiality, where they don't have to feel nervous about, form at all. Touching on a popular culture reference to here, when I think about the show Billions, when I think about the character of Wendy Rhodes, her goal is to create peak performance for her employees at X Capital. And when you think about it, it's also tackling a lot of very difficult issues across mental health. And while over time the show has transitioned for her to kind of like touching it from a sense of weakness, she's also found much more human ways to transition it to be, hey, understand what your difficulties are, what you're dealing with, and let's work on channeling it together and building it into actually a badge of honor, building it into something that you are firing forward with. And I think that's something where people recognize some over time, whether through popular culture or even through their workplaces, that it is something that actually you should be proud about, because you can carry it as a battle scar, a badge of honor, again, whatever we want to call it. And so as I see both those perspectives to it, and then now you're starting to see some governmental resources that are building from it, I'm excited to see where this will go. I'm optimistic to see it. I'm also optimistic to see, hopefully, and I know I'm a little biased, but hopefully with the new administration in 2021, that will be pushing towards a more deeper level to it, because you're starting to see actually one thing this current administration has done, which I will say is a good thing. They've limited the regulations. They've brought down the regulations for telehealth services. They actually, President Trump signed an executive order yesterday to open up more broadband services for telehealth across rural areas, as well as to build more pilot programs to explore telehealth services. Now, admittedly, one of the things that this administration has done right, but it's also something I imagine will continue, because in the world of telehealth includes behavioral health, includes mental health services from there as well. So I imagine that initiative will not be rescinded anytime soon. And it is a step in the right direction on a governmental level.
Fantastic.
Miriam,
do you want to?
Sure. I think along those lines, I have learned there are a lot of initiatives right now for free telehealth for frontline workers. Like, Chicago, there's a big, I just posted an article on our organization's website about those kind of initiatives where organizations and companies are banding together to try to make sure that people are getting these resources if they can't afford it. There are also telehealth for people who, we talked about people who, a lot of people are out of jobs right now, the 30 million are out of jobs. So there are also many initiatives for that. I talked to many private therapists who are right now doing sliding scales to help accommodate people who can't afford it right now and who might either not have insurance or their insurance isn't going to cover it. So I know that there are a lot of things that people are doing in the mental health profession to try to provide these resources. In addition to what's going on a governmental level, I know that there are a lot of initiatives. And I also know that workplaces have employee assistance programs and there was an article that we saw earlier about how human resource professionals want to talk to people about not just how are you, not just talk to employees, but how are you, but is something getting in the way of your work today, or how are you showing up today, and sort of trying to ask questions at work that support people to meet them where they are. And I know I have a friend who's a VP at a bank, and she has a whole team that she manages, and she tries to do daily affirmations and also relate to them. She's got young kids, so her employees that she manages who have young kids, she tries to relate to them on that level. She also tries to send positive things or things that might make people smile, because people need that these days. So I know that there are a lot of, both on the larger organizational level and then in people's different departments, people are trying to do a lot to bring positivity and bring mental health and do what they can, especially in these times. And I do want to note, though, that even before COVID, a study was done in which 60% of respondents said that they had symptoms of a mental health. A study was done in the workplace where 60% of respondents had symptoms of a mental health condition last year, and that same percentage didn't discuss it at their jobs. And so I think that this was a big problem before COVID, and now obviously, as we've discussed, it's gotten exacerbated. And I just think that these are things that hopefully, with initiatives that are going on both at a governmental level, and that people are being, mental health professionals and people at work are being more sensitive to all the needs that are out there for both people who lost their jobs and for people who might not be able to afford the mental health care that they need. The hope is that more and more people are getting the support that they need by people sort of banding together and realizing there's such a need. Because there are also, one last thing I'll say is, there are a lot of articles that have been out that I'm sure a lot of you have seen about how the next crisis, once hopefully we get through COVID, is going to be the mental health crisis and the lasting effects of what it's like to go through this pandemic. So, and for so many people of all ages, and the different effects that has. So that's something that's going to be with us a long time. And I think people are paying more attention to and realizing that the mental health aspects of this are, hopefully we should all be healthy and get through, the physical part of this. And then the mental health aspects are going to last a while as well.
I think listen, initiatives and feel-good initiatives in most cases are good. In most cases, it's better to do them than not do them. And I applaud companies that are making that effort. But I'd say the number one thing that I think companies can do for their employees is just, in addition to openness, having agility. I mean, we've come a long way over the last decade or two of saying that, sometimes to keep the best and most talented workforce, we've got to say, 9 to 5 or 9 to 5:30 is not going to work for everybody. So we're going to accommodate this person that has to come a little bit later or leave a little bit earlier, or is going to any number of other things, or needs to work from home a couple of days a week back when not everybody was working from home. I think that problems with initiatives tend to be something of a one-size-fits-all project, whereas different people have different needs. And some might say it's really great that my company is showing me that is really having these happy hours or having this time where we all come together. That may not be what everybody needs. I've been fortunate that the last two places I've worked, including my current one, and hopefully this will be any place I work in the future, I could very openly say, this day I have to leave at 4:30 because I have therapy, so I can't take any meetings after that time. And I didn't have to lie about where I was going. I could just say I'm going to therapy and know that it was going to be treated like the same way as I was saying I was going to be treated for my allergies or for any other type of medical issue. I think that basically the agility and the idea, you know what, if somebody could be open and saying, listen, I'm really having a tough day. I need to work from home today from mental health. Well, you know what, in addition to the goodwill out of that, you know what that opens up? That opens up for you to say, okay, I understand. Can you do this one small thing for us that we still need you on? Or can you be on this call for only a half hour? And if the answer is no, whereas if the person just said, I'm off because I'm not feeling well, you can't contact me all day, you've lost that person altogether. When the person can be open with you and say, I need a little bit of space, well, then it opens up time, then it opens up for the company to say, okay, we understand that and work with you. If you can give us a little bit for us, that will really help us. And if you can't, then we'll work it out. And in many cases, then the employee can then say, you know what, I can do that for you because it will be good for all of us. And that I can do. It opens up those conversations that would have been shut down otherwise.
Brilliant. I think that I don't have much to add. Actually, I just really I find a lot of hope and in each of these answers, and I think I'm seeing the tide turning, and to know like what we can do as an actionable item, because again, it is easy to talk and to sort of get on our soapbox, but then what do we do next? How do we take action? How do we move forward? Well, that's really the name of the game. That's why we're having this conversation in the first place. So to me, I think each one of your answers gives me some hope and gives us some answers, gives us a rough roadmap in a way of what can be done and how we can move forward. And so we are on our way to closing out. And so I want to go wear a mask, F, just kidding. So we had the conversation. So I want to give each of our guests, and then F, and then I'll close this thing down. But I want to give each of our guests a minute or two, just to any final thoughts or anything they just want to highlight. We'll start with Miriam, if that's okay, and then Sumeet, and then F.
Sure. I just think, echoing what you said, Josh, I do feel hopeful. I do feel like there's more awareness now. Obviously, we have a ways to go. It's not that we're where we need to be, but I do think there's more awareness. I think people are always sending me articles about the workplace, and I know there are a lot of human resources organizations and companies that send out articles to HR professionals around the country. So I feel like that deal with mental health in the workplace, and that there is a huge effort, especially even before COVID and now with COVID, there are steps being taken. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of mental health professionals who are hearing from clients they hadn't heard from in 5 years. I'm hearing that too. And so, but people are trying to adjust and make sure that individuals' needs are being met. And while there is a long way to go, I do see that people are trying and adjusting their typical protocols or whatever fees and all that kind of stuff to make sure that they can meet as many people as possible and help as many people as possible. And on a larger scale, the workplace, there are definitely many initiatives going on that I'm hearing about, and employee assistance programs and the survey I mentioned earlier, albeit it wasn't the best survey, but I know it was an attempt by the employer to meet people's mental health needs. So I think that there is more and more of that going on. And I think conversations like this to help propel the work that needs to be done going forward are key. And I'm honored to be a part of this inaugural conversation about this. So thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Thank you. Sumeet.
One of the greatest takeaways that I've seen about this evolution on mental health and the conversation around it is the setup of situational awareness. And we've always looked upon that terminology from the world of the military world. And it's just that as you're in the battlefield, you're situationally aware. You're aware of your battalion, you're aware of your colleagues, you're aware of the field across it. You have to be at your A game across it. I think if we applied that to the workplace, we apply that to daily life on being aware of our surroundings, being open to showcasing how we feel, to be open to how we feel, how we're doing from it. It's no longer driving into a shell. It's not just for the fact that we will be better and more productive people, that we will recognize what we're dealing with and we're not packaging it away. We will recognize the resources and things and opportunities available, and we will find people that we can commiserate with, our inner circles, professionally and personally from it. What is also so powerful about it is to then open the door for others to talk about their struggles. And I think we're in this really exciting time that we're evolving towards that position where people can truly be unafraid. They don't have to worry about the ramifications or any sort of punishment that exists from here, because we will be better and we will be more productive. We will be better as a society onto it. And I'd close out with this perspective. If you're struggling, don't hesitate to tell someone in your inner circle about it. You will, and don't ever be afraid, because you'd be surprised on if that person will be open about it, but also, more importantly, that person may also open up to you about his or her struggles. And I think that sense of commiseration, that sense of connection, and it's something I will always offer to any member of the audience who is still trying to find someone to open up to. I'm more than happy to do so. Like, DM me, reach out through either Twitter at @PE_feeds, FEEDS. I'm always available. I mean, I've gone through my struggles, and I've only been able to crawl out of this when I've started opening up to people, when I've started opening up to friends, to colleagues, to loved ones, to family members. It's a really difficult space, and I encourage everyone to give it a try. It's only going to make you happier and a better person, and it will all make us better people. Thank you again for having me on your inaugural edition, guys.
Thank you, Sumeet.
That was awesome. Can I add two things very quickly?
You can add three.
Yes.
Sorry. So first of all, like Sumeet said, please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to talk to anyone and share my experiences. Miriam at noshameonyou.org. Feel free to reach out or find me on Facebook or anywhere, or Twitter, Instagram. The other thing is, one thing I wanted that in terms of Sumeet saying about people having conversations at work or finding their inner circle, one great story that happened, we distribute magnets with crisis information on it. And a story I recently heard was that someone at their workplace had one of our magnets on her drawers, and a colleague came by her office, saw the magnet, and then they felt comfortable talking, and they ended up bonding over mental health and all that. So what I would say is, even having something that doesn't mean that you have a mental health condition, like having a magnet or whatever it is, something related to mental health. Right now we're not in offices, but having it behind you, if you're on Zoom, can sometimes spark a conversation. And it doesn't mean you're living with a mental health condition. It doesn't mean you're sharing something you don't want to share, but it also can make someone feel comfortable. And that was a beautiful story that someone shared with me that really made me feel like. So I think sometimes the little signs to let people know, I'm someone that you can come to, I'm someone that is safe, can also go a long way in these conversations. Okay, sorry. Thanks again.
Now, Miriam, do you happen to have one of those magnets nearby?
I do.
Can you first show it to us, and then can you also read off the crisis contact information? Because I was just realizing that we want to make sure that we get that in there at some point on this as well.
Sure. I'm going to go grab it from my refrigerator. Hold on one second.
All right. F, why don't you vamp for a minute and give us a couple final thoughts, and then we'll kick back to Miriam.
So yeah, I think that one of the things of productivity, one of the reasons why I can feel optimistic is the fact that this is happening. Because I wouldn't have taken this as a given 10, 15 years ago. My big slide happened in the summer of 2006. And coming out of that, when I decided I wanted to ultimately make a difference and a road that led me on to many of the projects that I was on, and many of the things I've done with each of you. And by the way, I forgot to mention this. Yeah, Josh, I was also an author in one of your first books as well, too. I remember that time, a few friends were like, well, do you want to go public with this? Or what are you going to say if people ask you what happened? And I'll say, if they ask me, I'll tell them the truth. It was not taken as a given that that it was a good thing to talk openly. It wasn't for a while, and maybe it's still not now, but where we are now compared to where we were in 2006, 2007 is really night and day. And I think that, I'm grateful to each of you for doing this with me. Josh, obviously, couldn't ask for a better co-host. And Sumeet and Miriam, taking chances on us, first time we're doing this. And I just want to say, not only am I grateful, but I think it really says something, not just about your commitment to this, but the fact that, to this as well too, but that we talk about mental health in the workplace, you're giving up, you're not just giving up your time, you're each giving up an hour plus of your very busy workday. And I know that both of you are extremely busy and being pulled in a gazillion directions, but each of you have made the statement that this is really important and it's worth it. It's something that's worth it to spend an hour of your work time doing, because it's going to make all of us better. It's going to make all of us more productive, and it's going to move us forward. So I think the very fact that this is happening is really a sign that we have good things, that we're getting a good place, and we'll hopefully see even hopefully 2020 with all of its with all the bad news it brought and all the reasons for pessimism it brought. I think that this is actually a sign of optimism of where we're going and hopefully where we will be.
Thank you, F. I appreciate that, man. I'm pretty sure you could have asked for a better co-host, but this is what you got. But yeah, so Miriam, you want to show us that magnet real quick? And whoever's phone is going off, can we?
Here's the magnet. And if anyone watching, we're happy to send it to you wherever you are. If anyone wants to have one or more than one sent to them, we're happy. Sure, Sumeet, I got you. Anyone else, please feel free to write me in, and we'll send them to you.
Amazing. So that crisis, thank you, Miriam. 800-273-8255. If you have a rotary phone for some reason, it's 800-273-TALK. I don't know why you have a rotary phone. Get with the times. But just kidding. But yeah, so my goodness. I want to thank our two guests, Sumeet and Miriam, just for your wise words and your time and energy and giving of yourselves and to this topic and to our show today, our inaugural show. Holy cow. Efrem, I couldn't.
Inaugural show of Cubicle Lift.
Yes. Our inaugural show of Cubicle Lift, and I couldn't ask for a better host, and I'm so grateful. And so I just want to say thanks, and I'm optimistic as well that we are moving in a healthy direction with this topic, and that we're going to have more conversations to come. And yes, so everyone out there, thank you so very much for watching. This has been Cubicle Lift. We're talking about mental health in the workplace, and we're going to hopefully continue to keep having more conversations in the near future and beyond. I'm Josh Rivedal with the I'm Possible Project, and for my dear friend and co-host Efrem Epstein of Zipline. This has been Cubicle Lift. Thank you so very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we're out.